All right, great to see everybody here tonight. Let's go ahead and be seated if you're standing at this time. I'd like to welcome everybody here and online to another class of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification Course. What we're doing here in the Teacher Certification course is to hopefully give you and impart to you our knowledge and give to you the knowledge and some examples and ways that the Peaceful Solution can be taught to your students and as you're training other teachers, which hopefully all of the students of the Peaceful Solution will want to be teachers at some point in time. So we are in the self-control unit, and I would say that unit in itself, I mean, without self-control, you can't do any of this, really. You've got to have self-control to be able to, obviously, control yourself. You've got to have self-control to have the determination and the discipline to do the things that you need to do to change your life. And so that's what the Peaceful Solution is here for. And it does change the hearts and minds. So let's go ahead and get started. So today, on page 144 is where Catan left off in the self-control unit. And that is titled, Be Your Own Person. I'm going to go ahead and start back at the top again. Isn't it ironic that both positive and negative influences can come from the same source? For example, there are many violent and sexually explicit shows on TV, but there are some that are educational. The TV can be a great source of information about events that can affect the stability and peace of our world. Now, Catan went over this, and it fit in with everything else he had already taught us there on the previous pages. And let's go ahead and go back to the lesson plan. It's on lesson plan 5, page E. And procedure 8, of course, at the bottom says, instruct students to turn to the section entitled Be Your Own Person, found on page 144. And we've done that. We are currently on page 44, and we'll be finishing up there. We'll be on page 144 for a little while tonight. Then we'll go to procedure number 9, and I just thought I'd give you a little advance warning on that one. It says the heat is on. Now, I think we can all tell the heat is on just by our surroundings, right? Okay, so let's go on over to page 144. And we're going to continue on there where Catan actually left off. So the second paragraph on Be Your Own Person says, the same holds true for your peers. Peers can be both positive and negative influences. The key to developing self-control to resist negative peer pressure is to learn how to be your own person. Now, notice it says developing self-control. And we've talked about this before, but I don't think there's enough that can even be said about it. It's not an automatic thing. You don't read through this book one time and say, hey, I got it now. Yeah, self-control. Oh, I knew most of this anyway, but yeah, it's a great reminder. It doesn't work like that. It takes a lot of work. So you develop self-control over a period of time. So the key to developing self-control to resist negative peer pressure is to learn how to be your own person. And negative peer pressure is exactly what it says. It is pressure now. It is one of the strongest pressures out there because, you're with people you know and supposedly like and might have known them for a long time, and you want to be included in the group and the things they do and all. So there's a certain pressure there for you to conform. Pressure from your peers. Now it can go beyond that and get to a point of pushing people around and everything, and there's positive and negative pressure both. All right, so ask yourself what you stand for. What are your values and what is the top priority in your life? In developing positive character, what you stand for should be moral excellence. Now, you know, we do have a unit called Building Moral Excellence, and we've got a few more intermediate units to go before we get there. But moral excellence is when you put all of these things together. Everything that you've been learning in the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, you put it all together, and when you are that person of integrity, that person that consistently practices the peaceful solution in every aspect, then you are a person of moral excellence. We are practicing the peaceful solution right now. We practice it in every part of our life. If you know, that's part of it, is we remember to practice it, because that's what's going to make the difference when the heat is on, when the pressure's on from our peers, when you're getting any kind of pressure. What's going to make the difference is what you have been practicing. If you're walking around as somebody, I guess the best word I could think of would be hypocrite, but if you're walking around, maybe quoting full pages of the peaceful solution to people and how wonderful it is and everything, but your life doesn't show that you're practicing it, you're just spitting out the words, then you're just hearing it and saying it. You're not actually doing it. And that's the part that you have to do. That's the part that we have to get to. We have to practice it, okay? And you know, the last sentence there in that paragraph that we just went over, what are your values and what is the top priority in your life? You know, values are those things that you believe in. Values, I mean, values are something that is very, very important, because your whole life is actually based on values. And let me just see here. I don't have a slide on this or anything, but on page 6 in your character unit is an entire section talking about values. Values are what you believe in or feel strongly about, and they also play a key role in developing your character. Everyone has a value system. Everyone in here has values. We all have somewhat different values, but hopefully we have the same values of the ones that rank up there at the top. You know, wanting to practice the peaceful solution in everything we do in our life. You know, wanting to treat people the way that we want to be treated. You know, care and concern for others and our families and ourselves. So this is a very important thing. And if you're not familiar with values, if you've just joined in with us and everything, you need to really check that out. And for y'all that are going through the certification course for teachers, it's imperative that you know something about values. You know, you can't just stop. Depending on how long you've been aspiring to be a teacher of the peaceful solution and been in the certification course, you know, I don't know, if you just started, you need to go back and really look at these things. You can't leave anything undone. You have to go back and start at the beginning and get these concepts down and move on. Don't stop doing what we're doing where we're at. You know, stay with us and keep on going, but you can go back and study these things that we've already been through. Okay, so back to page 144 in the middle there. In developing positive character, what you stand for should be moral excellence. What you should value is life, yours and others. Your top priority should be to develop positive character traits like self-control, responsibility, humility, and by doing this you can become the best you can be. Once you've determined who you are as an individual, stick to it. Now, remember the title of this particular page is Be Your Own Person. I've got a slide here we can just go over real quick. And that is the character unit, page 70. And at the top of page 70, and we've got it on the slide there, if we can keep it on there for a little bit. As you get older, you rely on your friends more for companionship and acceptance. It's nice to be around others who are fun and share similar interests and personality traits as you. Having friends is great. But friends can also influence each other in negative ways. And this is why I put this here, because we're talking about being your own person. You know, not being the person that folds up and does everything that the crowd wants to do no matter what. You might be the one left standing there alone against everything else that the crowd is trying to get you to do. You know, maybe they haven't explained to you their side of the thing very, very much, or given you options or so forth, but you might be standing there and saying, no, I'm not going to do that, you know. So peer power is a big thing. So having friends is great, but friends can also influence each other in negative ways, and that's the problem. That's the problem. If your friends accentuate the negative and not the positive traits in their character and encourage you to do the same, they are influencing you in a negative way, and this is called negative peer pressure. Because we're talking about negative peer pressure, positive peer pressure, being your own person, the heat's on, meaning the pressure's on, and so forth, you know. So this is something that we need to be aware of, and you have a lot of tools to really work with and understand peer pressure. You know, all throughout the Peaceful Solution we talk about peer pressure, and you can see right there in the character unit, we have a whole section on it too. So let's continue on though. Now, set your mind, this is page 144 in the self-control unit, set your mind in advance not to allow anyone to influence you to do what you know is wrong. This is why it's up to you to distinguish between a positive and negative influence. Now, that can be hard to do sometimes. There's some things that you just know, hey, this is negative. Okay, I shouldn't kill anybody. That's negative. You know, if someone's doing that, if they're going to kill somebody, that's a negative influence, get away from it. And that's an easy one, right? Or at least should be. For most people, I'd say it's an easy one. But let's look at, on the overhead here, let's look at this list right here. It is a little bigger there. Okay, so choosing the influences. If you look at the words that are on this, by the way, this is character unit page 61. I'm going to turn over there in my book. Character unit page 61. You can too if you have one, or you can read it off the screen there. Let's leave that up for a little bit. So choosing the influences, or testing your knowledge about the influences. And so you look at that list of things right there and determine which of those are influences. You know, jobs, community, advertisements. Okay, that sounds reasonable. Designers, books, songs. Okay, we know songs can definitely be influences, right? Commercials. Yeah, I've seen a lot of commercials, and they influence me to go off singing their little jingles or acting the way they do. You know, in the past, I don't really see many today. Alcohol can be a huge influence. School, teachers, movies. Oh yeah, that's I'm gonna put a check mark by that. That's an easy one. Let's see, environment, styles, drugs, animals, businesses, schools, environment. I'll read it off here. Magazines, the internet, video games. I think we got advertisements in there twice probably, but actors and actresses, musicians and singers. Oh yeah, they can definitely be an influence. Religious leaders. Oh yeah. Let's see. There's the commercials and family, billboards. Oh yeah, billboards. I've seen some billboards that influence me to get off on the next exit. Colors. Oh yeah, colors. You know, you sit down in an Italian restaurant, you're going to have red tablecloths to, the red and white checkerboard thing. You know, kind of get you to buy things. The color red. politicians, friends, food, all these things. These you look at that, and there's some of them that are pretty easy to pick out. But the interesting thing about this whole list right here is those are all influences. So choose them all. Mark them all off. They're all influences. Okay. Be aware of that, because everything around you is an influence. In fact, I'm looking around up here right now, and I don't know if there's anything up here that I'm not influenced by. And then I look out here in the audience, and I see all of you, and I could be influenced if someone's sitting there giving me a nasty, dirty face. I could be influenced by that a little bit. Or yet, if somebody's smiling or joyful and everything, I can surely be influenced by that. And then the young men, usually we have a group of young men sitting up front here. If they're behaving and smiling and paying attention and everything, hey, I'm influenced by that too. There's a lot of feedback without anything even being said. So there are influences everywhere around us, okay? So that we can understand that just about everything is an influence, let's go back now to page 144. So that last sentence was talking about it's up to us to distinguish between a positive and negative influence. Now, it takes a lot of time to do that. You might not recognize something as negative right away. But as you practice the peaceful solution more and more, and you become more familiar with all the units of the peaceful solution, and go back and read and understand and practice, and it takes some time, you'll be able to pop them off just like that. You'll know if something's a negative influence so fast, you can turn away from it, All right. So let's move on just a little bit here. We're going to use the PEERS acronym. Now, we've had a few other acronyms in this book so far. We've got the STOP acronym. We have the REACT acronym. We have a few others. RESPOND, I think, was in here. Excuse me. We've got the PEERS acronym, and it's to help us remember how to practice self-control and avoid negative peer pressure. All right. So, for those of you that don't have a book, I'm going to go ahead. This is Self-Control Unit, page 144, which we're on right now. I'll put that on the screen. All right. So, P stands for persist in moral excellence. Now, are we all there yet? No, I don't think so. I know I'm not. Are we striving to be there? Are we striving to have moral excellence? That's the thing that we need to be doing. Remember, practicing the peaceful solution, we get to a point to where we consistently practice the peaceful solution and don't turn back and turn our back on it. and we've become familiar with all the units of the peaceful solution and understand them, even to a point to where we can teach them. Then we are on the road, and of course we're showing in our everyday walk in life that we are indeed practicing this moral excellence or the peaceful solution, where people can see that we're doing this and building these great character traits in our life, so people can see it. They can actually see it in us. You're not hiding nothing from nobody. If you're not practicing peace, you're not hiding anything. You might fool a few people for a little bit, but you can't fool everybody all the time. So, if there's one of those, like I said before, if you're going around, and you can even quote whole pages and everything, but you're not practicing the peaceful solution, no, that's not going to work. It's not going to work because you're not really teaching it in everything that you do. So what we want to do is we want to persist in moral excellence. We want to be that example of moral excellence. We're trying to get there. If we make a mistake, make a bad choice, someone's around, we could tell them, hey, I'm sorry you had to see that. You can let them know that you know what you should do, and please that they not be influenced by your bad actions, And that's what we want to do, is especially if it's a student or something that sees this, we want to make sure that they're not basing everything they do just upon what we do. But I got to tell you, your students will be basing a lot. They will be They will be holding you up to a certain standard and watching what you do. Okay? Keep that in mind. Because if you're stealing, and they know it's stealing, and they see it taking place, how are you going to teach them not to steal? You can't. If you're talking bad about people, calling them names, cutting them down, tearing down their reputation in front of people, how could they possibly believe that they could trust you? You might fool them for a minute, but how could they believe that they could really trust you? They won't. And they won't be looking at you as a person of moral excellence. And therefore, they're probably not interested in too much of what you have to teach them. So let's persist in moral excellence, or the striving to get there. All right, let's look at number 2. It's educate yourself. Now, if you remember, on the list of positive character education traits, the number 1 top thing on the list is, guess what? Get educated. Get educated. Well, it's not just talking about your ABCs and your 1, 2, 3s, and no, I'm not going to sing my ABC song again for those that requested it, okay? So your ABCs and 1, 2, 3s are important because you have to know those things to function in society, right? But what's more important, yeah, that's important, but what's more important is educating yourself in the proper way to conduct yourself with people. That way you can actually learn all those other things a lot quicker, and you can share them quicker and everything. But educate yourself in how to conduct yourself, how to practice that moral excellence around people, or by yourself too, obviously, but around people, so you can be an example to them. Educate yourself on why you need to do these things, knowing that there is a ripple effect that takes place with everything you do, whether positive or negative. There is going to be a reaction. All right, let's go look at number 3. Excuse me. Evaluate the influences, whether negative or positive. Evaluate those influences, whether negative or positive. All right, so remember evaluating these things. What you want to do is well, let me just go ahead and bring this out real quick. You can go ahead and take it off the overhead for a moment. Okay, remember this sign right here. Okay, you've seen it before. Stop, think, options, and proceed. Okay, so we want to stop when we're evaluating these influences that could affect the way that we think, feel, and act. When we're evaluating these influences, we want to stop and we want to think about it. That's the evaluating phase. Are these things positive or are they negative, right? You got to think about these things. You got to know what you're talking about. You have to think about these options and which way to go. Okay, you determine it's negative. What are you going to do now? Are you going to go ahead and go with it, or are you going to resist it, which is the next thing? I'm a little spoiler there, but or is it a positive influence, which you're going to go along with that? What are you going to do? These are the options you have to consider, and then of course you want to proceed with the right choice. So let's look at R. R is resisting that negative. Now, you might think that you're very strong. You might think that, hey, I've read this peaceful solution. I know this deal. This is all basic stuff. It's just saying it a different way. My mama and daddy taught me this stuff when I was young. Well, I knew how to act. I didn't do it all the time, but I surely knew how to do it. No. You might have got taught some of this, but you didn't get taught all of it. Because the depth that the peaceful solution goes into is what you have to be able to resist that negative. You can't do it on your own. You can be your own person, like it says at the top of the page, because of the choices you make, but you can't resist the negative on your own. without having learned the peaceful solution and how to conduct yourself. So we've got to learn how to resist the negative and go with the positive. Now, let's go ahead and look at S. And remember, this is the PEERS acronym, to help us remember how to practice self-control and avoid negative peer pressure. And yes, it is a lot like the STOP acronym. You can see that for yourself. It's a lot like it. Okay, S. S stands for succeed. Success can be achieved when you resist negative peer pressure by practicing self-control. When you resist negative peer pressure by practicing self-control. Okay. I think it would be in line to suggest that we turn back over to page 130 real quick while we're talking about being your own person and peer pressure. Let's go over to page 130. And page 130 is talking about conformity and peer pressure. I'm not a robot. No one pushes my buttons. And so you look in there, and like in the first paragraph, it says to conform is to change your beliefs, attitudes, and actions in order to meet certain standards. Now, excuse me, back on page 144, if there's peer pressure around you and you're evaluating the influences, whether negative or positive, then you've got to keep in mind, page 130, that conformity. That conforming is to change your beliefs, attitudes, and actions in order to meet certain standards. So the standards you'd be talking about meeting if you have negative influences, this negative peer pressure coming at you, you want to make sure that you're going to conform to proper, upright, positive standards, not the negative standards. So conformity and peer pressure go hand in hand, and it's important to know that. There's a quote at the bottom of page 144. It says, being your own person, you can develop the self-control to withstand the negative influences of your peers. Excuse me. Kind of dry out there today. If y'all noticed, I think the temperature was not quite a nice little 75 or 80 degrees. It was a little bit above that. And so you got to remember, I always mention this, to stay hydrated during this kind of weather. It's very important. Even when you think you might be, if you're out there working and you're not sweating and it's hot, but maybe you're not even feeling it, you might ought to look at taking a break and getting in the shade and getting some water very badly, okay? So on page 145, the heat is on in more than one way. All right. Hang on just a minute. I want you to go back to Lesson Plan 5, page E, in procedure number 9. Okay, so we are starting this procedure now. The heat is on. And this exercise tests what you've learned. Now, we're not going to do all of it. We're going to pick out a few and do it, okay? This is something that you can sit at home and be a little more thorough with, or wherever you're at. And so we're turning to page 145, and we want to read the scenarios and answer the questions. And if you were in a classroom situation, a little smaller situation than this with these many people out here and then on the internet too, but if you were in a smaller classroom, you could actually have a discussion and also be sure to emphasize and reinforce the concepts. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and look at a few of these things. The heat is on, page 145. Negative influences usually come as a package deal. For instance, while hanging out with your friends, you could suddenly find yourself in a situation where you are being encouraged to smoke a joint and watch a violent, sexually explicit movie. Now, let me just ask you real quick, would that be a negative or a positive influence? Negative, right. Everyone answered it properly. And hopefully y'all out there in TV land or internet land also did too. There should be, if you've been learning the peaceful solution and practicing it any at all and trying to change your heart and mind, you should know that being encouraged to smoke a joint or watch violent shows and these sexual movies and everything is not right, because that stuff layers in your mind. It goes into your mind, and you know what goes in is what comes out. What you're feeding your mind is going into your memory, into, you know, it says changing the heart and mind. It goes into your mind and heart, and we want to get that negativity out. We want to change it to where we're not desiring to even smoke a joint or watch violent shows. What is the benefit of watching a violent movie? Is there any benefit to that? Are you going to learn anything from it? There's nothing to learn. You know, unless you're not wanting to practice peace. If you want to practice war, you might think you learned something from it, but then you go out there and start trying some of those, kung fu, karate moves and everything on somebody, and you get your head thumped. You know, so you don't want to do that. You don't want to go there anyway. But there's no benefit to it whatsoever. And even though smoking a joint, you know, there's many states that are legalizing marijuana for recreational and medical use. In fact, there's many drugs being legalized right now for recreational use. There's psilocybin mushrooms. I haven't heard of LSD being legalized yet, but I know heroin is being talked about being legalized. Cocaine is being legalized in some areas. There's all kinds of stuff that's being legalized and no longer criminalized, you know. So it doesn't make it great for you. All right, you got to remember that. You should get educated, find out the real deal about these things. So to top it all off, after all this, your friend invites you over on a day when his parents aren't at home. Okay? When situations like these occur, the heat is on you to think fast and use self-control to react. Remember the REACT acronym. We just went over it a few pages back, you know. So the heat is on you to react appropriately to your peers. And remember that PEERS acronym. Remember, it's a lot like the STOP acronym. You want to persist in moral excellence. You want to keep it in the top part of your mind and educate yourself in all these things. You know, what's great and what's not great. And evaluate those influences, whether they're negative or positive, before you move on. All right, so what should you say and what should you do? Read the following scenarios and fill in the answer that best shows practicing self-control. All right, well, let's do this one. While at your friend's house, he puts on a movie that is violent and, let me just move that. Puts on a movie that is violent and sexually explicit. Well, what should you say? Hey, I've been waiting to see that movie. No, not if you're practicing peace, because it's no benefit to you. It's not going to help you. In fact, it's going to be a detriment to you. You put it fresh in your mind, it's going to be in there. All right, so, but anyway, it says, what should you say? And all of us have thoughts of what could be said. And one of the suggested things you could say is, hey, what other movies do you have? I'm trying not to rot my brain. You know? Or you could suggest that you don't even watch a movie, that you go do something else, you know, whatever it might be, something positive. Anyway, it says, what should you do? And, of course, if he doesn't compromise and he wants to watch that movie, you might ought to get up and leave. That's what you really probably should do. Not probably, you should. If he's intent on doing stuff like that that's going to rot your brain, you should get away from it and let him go ahead and rot his. I mean, you can suggest to him that he doesn't do it, but you're not going to stop him and you can't force him. You're riding in a car with your friend when suddenly she puts on a CD that has more curse words than you even knew existed. It's making you feel very uncomfortable. Well, what should you say? You know, and I can't help but think and mention to you that with the peaceful solution, if you're practicing the peaceful solution and really have been doing it for some time and really have a set of values that are bar none, I mean, you really stand behind them, you've made your mind up in advance, you're determined to do the right thing, and you've been practicing self-control and doing a pretty great job of it, you probably wouldn't be riding with this person in the first place. Just like the last example, you probably wouldn't even be with them in the first place. You would probably already know a lot more about them and probably steer clear, you know. But in the, you know, strange case that this does occur and possibly your friend has gone off on the deep end and you get in there and they've got these CDs that are, you know, spitting out more nasty stuff that's vulgar and vulgar to everybody around, and the other cars can hear it when you pull up and everything. You know, you could say, could we listen to a different CD? You know, and tell them you don't see the point in listening to that at all, that you don't talk like that and you really don't even want to listen to it. And then what would you do if they refuse to compromise? What would you do? You know, you might want to go home. You might want them to get them to take you home right away. And then reconsider completely if you were ever even going to go anywhere with them. It goes back to being educated and knowing about your friends, you know, really getting to know them a little bit before you call them your close friends, right? You get to know them. See what they're about. You know, that outside personality that pulls you in the first place. Or if they're a con artist, you know, that personality that pulls you in and they're doing it on purpose to take advantage of you. Or they do it just like the person that puts up their best foot forward and has that great personality, and, you know, they're in a job interview and they're talking to the boss and have you ever stole anything? Oh, no. You know, are you going to be at work every day? Oh, yes, I will. Are you going to be on time? Oh, yes, I will. I've never missed a day of work, you know. And you're saying all these great things to them, and then after about 2 weeks on the job, then they find out the real deal. You were a hypocrite. You were lying. You're putting forth a false front, you know. So that's what a con artist does, and that's what it is, sadly, when we're dealing with people that we sometimes call friends. They start, it looks like we could probably get along with them, they look like a great person, you don't think they'd ever steal or do anything, but it takes time to get to know them, and that's what you got to remember when you're talking about friends. All right, let's look at number 4 on page 146. Your class just found out you were going to have a substitute teacher that day. Someone suggested making paper airplanes to bombard her with while her back was turned. Now, is that the right thing to do? I mean, even if the paper airplane didn't fly up and poke her in the eye or, you know, startle her and she had a weak heart and had a heart attack or something. I mean, even if the paper airplane didn't do anything like that and it just fell to the floor, is that the right thing to do? Would anybody have even thought about the damage that could be occurred by something as simple as flying a paper airplane towards somebody when their back is turned? Think about the scenarios that could take place. Let your mind wander a little bit. It could be bad. I mean, you know, a lot of us threw paper airplanes. Maybe might be some here now that still do or have done it, you know. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with paper airplanes if done in the right place at the right time, you know. But this is not right. So what would you say? Would you join the crowd? The heat's on, remember? This is all talking about the heat is on. It's not some easy deal. You're wanting to be accepted. You're wanting to be in there with the in-group. You want to be with that clique, you know. And so the heat is on. And it's not that big a deal to just fold up some paper airplanes, but you've got your mind set in advance and determined to do the right thing. What should you say? You know, tell them, no, I'm not going to do that. It's wrong, you know. What should you do? Well, you could sit quietly in your seat, or you could even let you could ask to talk to the teacher after class and talk to her about it, you know, or he or whatever the teacher might be. to get a clear understanding of what took place, and so that the teacher has a clear understanding of what took place, to protect everybody, not only the teacher but the other students too. Okay, let's see. Well, your friends invite you to a huffing party. Number 6, a huffing party. Well, that's where a lot of people sit around and they sniff gas or glue or rush or nitrous oxide, or there's so many things that people do, and there's still many things that can be bought off the store shelf that you can go home and sit right there and do this right out of the can. And it's not great, and I'm not going to mention those things. I'm not wanting anybody to go off into the store and buy these and say, hey, I'm going to go try it and see if it really works. No, we're not trying to do that. But your friends invite you to a huffing party. What it is you're trying to get high. And you can explain to them the harmful effects and try to talk them out of doing it, because people die doing these things. People get asphyxiated when they're huffing gasoline, when they're huffing paint thinner, when they're huffing glue, when they're huffing any of these things that cause the vapors to go up in your brain and burn your brain cells out. It hurts you a lot. And so getting educated, remember, getting educated, the number one thing in the peaceful solution, the number one positive character education trait, get educated, and that's what we're doing now, getting educated. You'll know what's wrong with these things and you can explain it to others. And then what should you do? If you've explained it and they still want to keep on doing it, you should get up and get out of there as soon as possible. Don't wait. There's no reason to wait. So many things could occur. There could even be a fire. It could explode in someone's face, because many times these things they're huffing are volatile chemicals. Okay, well, enough on that there. Let's go to page 148 real quick. So a final thought, and I don't know, I hate to call it a final thought, because this is something you should keep in your mind all the time. I mean, this chapter right here, about all of these things, all of these influences. I mean, every page here is just unbelievably important to our lives and to changing our lives and the way that we conduct ourselves with others, maintaining that self-control. We've got it. We're practicing it somewhat, we're really doing our best, and then these curveballs and pitfalls come our way, and so we've got to know how to maintain. So this is a thought. Keep in mind that this chapter dealt with only a few of the influences that you will encounter. The internet, books, magazines, and people other than your peers and family can also influence you. And this is an important thing to get over to the students. This is the thing to get over to them, is that you can be influenced by such you can be influenced by so many different things, everything. And so you really have to be on guard all day long, every day. It's up to you to set your mind in advance and practice self-control to distinguish the positive influences from those that are not positive influences. If you will make developing positive moral character your number one priority, you will be able to maintain your self-control and resist negative influences. All right. So we've talked quite a bit about these influences, and we're going to do a little reminding here. We're going to move on at this point a little bit to what I've learned. Let's go back here to page LP 5. Yep, I went too far. Edit mark. LP 5, or Lesson Plan 5, page E. Okay, it says in Procedure 10 to conclude the lesson by having students read the sections entitled One Final Thought and What I've Learned, found on pages 148 and 149. And encourage students to practice the REACT acronym to evaluate whether an influence is positive or negative, and then apply the peaceful solution method of practicing self-control. When they make this a habit, they will successfully maintain their self-control and develop positive moral character. I'm pretty sure we're not going to finish with page 149 tonight. but I'd like to get started there, and we can finish up. By the way, the next class is on Sunday, July 24th at 5:30 p.m., and we'd like to see you all there. We'll be continuing on here in this chapter and finishing up this chapter and possibly moving on to the next one, or possibly just finishing up. But we're going to go ahead and look at page 149. Now, 149 at the top of the page, it says, what I've learned. And again, this is just to kind of test where we're at, kind of a review about everything that we've gone over. And we're not going to have a written test on this right now or anything. But I've got a slide here. For those of you that don't have a book, you can kind of read along with us here. The page 118. Let me read this. An influence is something or someone that can affect the way I think, feel, and act. So let's go over to page 118 here in the self-control unit. Got the page up there at the top. All right, on page 118, the question of the day: what are influences? Well, an influence is something or someone who can affect the way you think, feel, and act. Now, think of those things. The way you think. All right, so you might be watching the latest on the elections that from January and the events that took place around that time. You might be watching that, or hard to get away from it. You might be watching the nightly news. You could be listening to a talk program or something, thinking you're going to get something out of it. And you might be influenced to think differently than what you were thinking when you first heard what they're talking about. And that's what they're trying to do. Media influences. And you might hear something that would change your mind completely. Well, I used to be a Republican, but now I'm going to be a Democrat. Or I used to be a Democrat, now I'm going to be a Republican. Well, I always wondered if abortion was okay, and that makes sense that it's not okay, or that it is okay, or, you name it, your mind can be changed. You can be influenced. The way you think can be influenced by something as simple as what you hear, what you see, what you taste, what you smell, what you do, what those around you do, everything around you. So, it's a something or someone, see how broad that is? Something or someone that can affect the way you think, feel, and act. Influences can also affect what you value, or they can motivate you to adopt new values. Remember on page 6 of the character unit, we talked about values a little bit, and I suggested you go back and really firm that up in your mind and realize that we all have value systems. We have values, each and every one of us, and it absolutely helps you to stay on whatever track that is with positive moral values. If those are real values in your life, it will help you avoid these things and push them off so that you're not influenced by them, okay? All right, so you can adopt new values. You can change your values, Anything that has the potential to affect what you value also has the potential to affect your character and hence your self-control also. So you might just throw self-control out the window and decide, you know what, man, I'm going to go ahead and watch this movie. It's not that bad. Or, you know what, I don't need to go to that class anyway, I mean, it can change everything about you. It can change your values. It can change your self-control. It can change what you want to do, the way you feel. The way you feel. You can hear a song and it can change the way you feel like that. You could be very joyful and the next thing you know, man, you're sad and thinking about something, that went on 20 years ago and was horrible, and you've got another tear in your beer, and, all these sad songs, and that's what they do. They play on your emotions. Songs the media, movies, all these things, they play on your emotions to affect the way you think, feel, and then go out and act too. Because how many people have ever watched a movie? We've been through this, and we're talking about the influences a little deeper. How many have ever watched an action movie and then gone out of that action movie quoting the hero that just killed 35 people barehanded and drove off into the sunset with the girl in a new convertible car or something? How many people have come out of the movie theater and acted the way that person was acting, either by their accent or tone of voice or the things they say? You come in peace, but you leave in pieces. Things like that. It's just one of them. The very popular people go out saying it all the time, or then the way they act in doing the karate moves and all that stuff, or jumping off a building, or trying some of the stunts. It's ridiculous, but that's what occurs. So you can be influenced. Your thinking, the way you feel, and the way you act can be influenced by these things. Doesn't have to be. You don't have to take hold of it and do it. It's an influence, but you don't have to take hold of it. You can resist the negative and go for the positive. And so, speaking of positive influences, let's go ahead and stick that up there. What are positive influences? Positive influences. Positive influences will motivate you to make choices and decisions that will build your character, not cut it down. So when we're talking about building your character, we're not trying to build. It would be kind of ironic to say that, well, I'd like to build negative character. Negative is minus. You're taking away. You're not building character. You're destroying it. You're cutting it down. So what we want to do is we want to build positive character. And it's just like in building a house, a building, or anything else. You could take Lego blocks, and if you're building something, aren't you adding to it? Right? You guys know what Lego blocks are? Yeah, so you're adding to it. You're putting something on top of the other. You're building. If you're taking things off, you're tearing it down. You're not, maybe not destroying it, but you're not having that same thing. You're taking it apart. So we want to build positive character, so we have to add stuff to it. We want to make the right choices and decisions that will do that. Positive influences can come in many different forms, and a positive influence won't conflict with a moral choice. So a positive influence and a moral choice, they go together like, well, I won't mention some of those things. There's so many things that people say it goes together like this and this and that, but they go together. They go hand in hand. They work together. They're synergistic. It takes it all. So a positive influence won't conflict with a moral choice. You won't have to decide. You won't be thinking that an influence is positive, and then you don't see how it could possibly go with your choosing not to steal. It doesn't work that way. They go together. The positive influence and the moral choice go together. Positive influences can come in many different forms. They can be a person, an experience, and we've talked about all these things. It can be literally anything. A person, an experience, a book you've read, a show you've seen, all these things. And by the way, that was on page 119 of the self-control unit. An example that's given on that page is your parents have always encouraged you to take your education seriously and pay attention to the world news. They want you to be aware of what's going on in the world around you. I'd say the world news is an influence. There's plenty of things on there that's positive and negative, and so you really have to watch it. Years ago, Years ago, people felt strongly about the world news being a format of facts being presented to people. True facts is what most people considered it. I don't think it was always that way. I think there was always some opinion and everything, but more so now today, it seems like it's very opinionated, you know. So you really have to be careful. It's not an automatic thing that's a positive influence. But I think you should be aware of what's going on around you, definitely. Where you get your news from should be an important thing to consider, because not everywhere you get your news is it going to be right. In fact, some have unknowingly gone to a satire news site and read something and been horrified with what it said and then spread that as truth. I even remember a Peaceful Solution student doing that one time. It was like a horrible thing. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember it was really bad. And come to find out, it was on one of these satire news networks that it was a joke. You know, they were making fun of the situation. It wasn't real at all. But it was relatively new to see those sites coming out in the open, and at least those you can tell they do say that they are satire, and that you need to be careful with what you do with what you hear. Sadly, though, there are many internet sites and news sites and talk show sites and everything else that claim to be, rather than claiming to be fake or satire, they claim to be true and real, but they're not. So be real careful out there on that. It's not an automatic thing that the news you're watching is correct, okay? So once again, I'd like to remind everybody that on Sunday, July 24th at 5:30, we are going to have another class of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification course, and we will be back on Chapter 5, Maintaining Your Self-Control, and we will be finishing up with what I have learned. Okay, so with that said, if you'll all please come back and see us again. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you.